Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the RETEC webinar, OTC Monograph Updates, What You Need to Know. We have with us today our speakers, Caitlin Lynes, who is who is our strategic account manager for our pharma customers, and we have Gary Sainer, our senior manager of information solutions for life sciences. Just a couple of quick logistics for today's webinar. This is a live recording, so all participants are muted. But if you do have questions, you can drop them in the chat box, and we will save some time at the end to hopefully get your questions answered for you. And then either this afternoon or in a few days, you'll receive an email with the slides and video link of this webinar as well. Okay. We just wanted to quickly show you how to navigate your way to our Knowledge Center for anything you might have questions about that we're not covering today. So this is just a screenshot of our homepage showing you how to navigate it. But there's also a link just right here at the top. And then we have links to our social pages. Make sure you follow us for the latest updates. Okay. And finally, what we will be covering today, our speakers are going to take a look at the US FDA OTC drug monograph listing overview. Say that 10 times fast. The compliance requirements, compliance timing, and how RETEC can help you with that. And then we'll save some time at the end for a Q&A session. Okay, and with that, I will hand the presentation over to Caitlin to get us kicked off.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. We'll jump right into it. US FDA OTC monograph regulations. And actually, before I jump into it, I want to take some time to go over some of the definitions that you're going to hear a lot of during today's call. So first and foremost, the OTC monograph drug. This is a non-prescription over-the-counter drug that might be marketed without an approved drug application under Section 505 of the FD&C Act. If it meets the requirement of Section 505G of the FD&C Act, as well as other applicable requirements. And then you're also going to be hearing Gary and I using the term OTC monograph. This is a rule book for each therapeutic category establishing conditions such as the active ingredients, the indications, doses, route of administration, labeling, and testing, which an OTC drug is generally recognized for as safe and effective. And my first question for Gary, Gary, can you give us a bit of information about what drugs are affected by these new regulations?
Yeah, sure. We'll go into a quick focus on human OTC monograph drugs. So these particular drug listings have an SPL document type that it's equal to the human OTC drug label. Not in scope for this discussion are pretty much everything else. So all the drug products. So we're talking now about human prescription drugs, not applicable. Biologics and blood products, not applicable. All those veterinary products that are under the animal drug banner, not in scope. So we're focused, Caitlin, really just on these human OTC drug products in this discussion today.
Okay, great. And then can you give me a bit of information on what is the FDA regulatory framework requiring this OTC monograph change?
Well, we have to do a little bit of a history lesson here and go back in time, Caitlin, to 2020 when the CARES Act, so that was the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, known as CARES. So it rolled out a number of things, obviously, on the coronavirus. But included in that particular act, there was a section that made a change to the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. And that added Section 505G. And this is a particular section now in the act that basically reforms and modernizes the way OTC monographs are created, the way they're managed, the way they're changed. There was literally about a 50-year-old process under something called the OTC drug review that needed to work its way through various phases. Like, there was 3 stages where it had to be met in various milestones, and there had to be some rulemaking attached to it. So there was regulations that were tied to this particular process, and you find all those references in the Code of Federal Regulations. So it was pretty slow to react. It was very burdensome, and I guess pretty much everyone, industry and the FDA, both wanted to streamline that process. So let's take a look at some of the things that are included in this revised approach. First of all, and this is probably the most important item, is that the FDA was given authority to issue something called an administrative order, and basically that is able to create or change a OTC drug monograph in the conditions around it, related to the generalized, recognized as safe and effective. So that is quite different. So the FDA is able to issue this administrative order, whereas before it used to go through a whole legal framework and get approved and then become part of the regulations. That's not true anymore. So that old system has been retired. We're now in this new system. There are provisions for industry to make requests for a new or change to a particular monograph. You might have heard of OMAR, stands for OTC Monograph Order Request. You do have to pay rather highly, by the way, for that request, but you do have the provision to do that. There's a next-gen portal website where you're able to make that request. And all of this did not happen for free. There was the establishment of the OTC Monograph Drug User Fee. So if you're familiar with the prescription drug version of that, PDUFA, there's a medical device version of that, MDUFA, and there's a bunch of, of these floating around. Now we have the OTC Monograph User Fee. So that places a fee, an annual fee on your OTC Monograph drug facility. So each year, now back in June, you should have already made this payment, a little bit over $26,000. My guess, if you look at all the other fees and the history, it'll probably go up next year. But so all this did not happen for free. Unfortunately, industry gets hit with a facility fee to help fund this particular activity and the new process at the FDA. Noteworthy is to understand that with administrative orders that come out, the FDA is now able to create something called monograph numbers. And we'll look into that a little bit more as we work our way through this session today. But referencing the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulation part number, and citing that particular item is no longer valid because that has evaporated. So that has gone away, and now you make references to a monograph number, and that's the primary thrust of this particular conversation today. Now, in addition to that CARES Act that came out, the FDA has also provided a public website. You can go to OTC Monographs at FDA, and you can search all those monographs that have been created. You can do an analysis and take a look at proposed and final administrative orders. And you can also comment on those particular orders. So that's a really nice website. If you're not familiar with that, I highly recommend that for this audience, to make sure you go to that website, become familiar with the actual published monographs. I would imagine many of those in the audience, just roughly a month ago now, back in September, received an email from the FDA. So that stirred a lot of interest throughout industry. And basically that message was, starting with the fourth quarter of this year, so that's the annual renewal and certification period for drug products, the OTC drug products would need to make use of a new marketing category called OTC Monograph Drug. and the citation to a CFR part number would now be obsolete, and now that application field, if you will, needs to point to a monograph number. So that did actually create a question. Well, what if I don't make that change today, or I don't need to make that change this year? Can I still point to some old existing OTC drug listings that have the old numbers, the old CFR number and so on, and point to that in my blanket no change certification? So there was a clarification that came out a little bit later that you can actually submit a blanket no change certification for this year, 2023, and have as part of that listing pointing to SPL's OTC listings that have the old terms and codes. It's our understanding that is only valid for this year. Now, if you need to make an update to a OTC drug product, as of October, the new rules are in place. So if you submit a listing in this fourth quarter, you will have to make use of the new terms pointing to the monographs. But we'll talk about the timing a little bit later here. But that's the bottom line from this email. The other thing that has happened is the SPL implementation guide has recently been revised. There's some revisions in place. The most recent one is in October 12, again, just now a few days ago, but it includes the instructions and validations for building SPL OTC listings based on these monograph numbers. So the information is there to build the SPLs if you need to exercise that. So with that, I think we're going to go over to a question. I'm going to go back to you, Erin. Are you able to launch that for us?
Yes, thanks, Gary. So now that you've explained a little bit to our audience, we're interested in knowing how many OTC drug products do you anticipate needing to update to comply with the OCT monograph changes. And you can see your choices right there on the screen: 1 to 10, 11 to 50, 51 to 200, 201 to 500, or more than 500, and 1 OTC drug products. So we'll leave this open for just about another 20 seconds or so. And if everyone in the audience would be able to give us an estimate, that would be great. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and close this poll out, and we'll share the results. Okay. So it looks like we're heavily looking at 1 to 10 drug products per company. So that's pretty interesting. All right. So Gary and Caitlin, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you. I think now we're going to jump into the compliance requirements. And Gary, one question on my calls with clients that I keep getting is, what are the specific OTC monograph drug listing changes that we need to be concerned about?
Yeah, what do I really need to do, right?
Yep, exactly.
So that is a real good question. So I did kind of put this into two different areas. First, there needs to be changes to the drug data elements. The changes that we're talking about are definitely going to affect 2 of those data elements: the marking category and your application number and citation. I think there might be some in the audience that might use the citation, like the part number, in some other documentation. I don't know if you would use that in your patient information or some other documents to the FDA. But be aware that if that shows up on an annual report or something, that could be another touch point that you'll need to make sure you check off. So any references to the parts are now obsolete. But what we're focusing on today would be the actual SPL drug listing that you send in to the FDA for your product. And the data elements of the marketing category and the application number are the 2 that are affected with this particular discussion. You may have been using the OTC Monograph Final and the OTC Monograph Not Final particular marketing category. And those two are now retired. So they're deprecated. You can no longer use those. They're no longer valid. And both of those are now replaced by the one on the right-hand side here, the OTC Monograph drug. So that is now showing on the SPL resource webpage. It's part of the validation rules. So if you do submit a OTC Monograph drug listing, these will be rejected and the OTC Monograph drug will be accepted. There is one other category that I just wanted to highlight, and it's this one here about the drug product manufactured under contract. So that particular category, it's still used, it's still valid, but you might have been using a CFR citation to a part number in this particular SPL. So we'll go into those changes next, but that particular marketing category is still valid, old and new. But be aware that, let's talk now about the application number. So if you were using an antacid product, you would be referencing citation, part 331 of the CFR. That has now been replaced with the monograph number M001. And then as another example, part 352 for a sunscreen drug product, now that references M020. And it goes on and on. There's about 30 of these particular parts. We charted them here in the next few slides. Let's take a quick cruise through those. We're not going to spend any time on those, but you can find your part number in the second column and the corresponding OTC monograph number on the left-hand column. And we'll just work our way through page 2 and page 3. Now we're at the bottom. There's one that I want to highlight, and it's this one down here on the bottom, NM900. And that caught my eye. It's like, wait a minute, that looks like a different format than all the others. And sure enough, it points to a different type of entry in this list. This includes something called non-monograph conditions. So it's a kind of a catch-all of a number of ingredients that have been used in OTC products that the FDA indicates does not have sufficient evidence to be safe and effective. So you might want to take a look at that particular item. You can go to this OTC Monograph website and find this NM900, and it has a live link, and you can download some information about it. It's one thing that if I was an OTC manufacturer, I'd want to take a quick look at to make sure that some of these products that are now not to be used, to make sure that they're not on my ingredient list, and therefore it could be problematic going forward. But those are the the 32 or so monograph numbers that you should be aware of, and this is dynamic. So there's others in the works, and the FDA certainly can add these, as they see fit.
Great.
Caitlin, back to you.
Yeah, so if we're looking at the rendered SPL file, maybe I'm looking at the old SPL file versus the new version with the monograph changes, where exactly should I be looking for these changes in the rendered SPL?
Right. Well, that's a good question. Where does my customer, or where do the downstream users see these changes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we go to the data elements down at the bottom of the rendered SPL, there's a chart with all those data elements, and this is after the narrative and patient information and so on. You'll find marketing information. So in this particular example, the marketing category was one of these old obsolete values, OTC monograph not final, and it pointed to the part 352. Once you make the changes and submit those to the FDA, then obviously that's going to show up in Daily Med, and people are able to render it. And now they're seeing your new values that you have submitted. In this case, it's the OTC Monograph drug. So very similar to OTC Monograph, not final, but it's definitely a new value. And then the part 352 has been changed to M020. So that's where you see it, and that's the only place that it'll be rendered in the SPL, Caitlin.
Okay, easy. Now, once we've made that change, how do we get this information to FDA?
All right, so that's the challenge, right? So manufacturers in the audience would find themselves on this graphic on the left-hand side. They're the drug labeler, and they have data that needs to be submitted over to the FDA. And they actually have a number of different means to make those submissions. So there's a couple different methods. One method is the service method. So you can engage an outside party, basically outsource this to a service. That's actually one of the tools that ReTech offers, where we're able to provide an outsourced service, receive the data from you, and then they take care of building the SPL file and submitting it through the electronic submission gateway to the FDA. A second option would be if you buy a tool, either from a vendor or you can actually build a tool. I know of some particular manufacturers that have done that. And now that particular tool, you rely on that tool to build the SPL and submit it to the electronic submission gateway. So this might be in-house. ReTech does offer a software as a service tool as well, but you would subscribe to that. That would be outside your firewall. But the second method is using some type of a tool to build that SPL file, and then again, it needs to be submitted through the electronic submission gateway. The third method that would be available is the FDA X forms. So this is an FDA provided online tool where you can go in and create drug listings and build them and have them generating, have that software generating an SPL file. Again, then that SPL file needs to be submitted through your account to the electronic submission gateway. The last one I'll touch on is a method referred to as CEDAR Direct. So again, this is a FDA provided online tool. And again, you work your way through, put data values into it, and it builds an SPL file. The subtle difference there is that this submission goes directly to the FDA database, the e-listing system, and bypasses the electronic submission gateway. Or at least it if it happens, it goes in the background. You don't need to have an account. So those are the three different methods. There's various certainly advantages, for one to the other. All of those, once they are received by the FDA, the NDC numbers that are submitted would show up in that NDC directory, again, a public database the FDA makes available. There is also something called the NDC SPL drug element file. So this is very important if you're working with CMS, the Centers for Medicare Medicaid. They look at those particular files for various reimbursement activities. So if your particular product is in that category, that's a very important file. That's how CMS receives that information. And the third place, which is probably the most popular in the discussion here, is that your SPL listings would show up on the National Library of Medicine Daily Med website. I think there's another poll in your bag over there, Aaron. Let's pull that out and let's run that at this point in time.
Yes, well, thank you, Gary, for explaining the submission methods to us. And now that we kind of understand, if everyone could just take a moment and let us know how you plan on updating your OTC product monograph listing. So you'll see the options there on your screen, using Read Tech, using another third-party vendor, building or buying your own software, FDA CEDAR Direct, or still undecided. And that is supposed to say build or buy software. That was a typo, I apologize. So we'll leave this open for just another few seconds. We would really appreciate everyone's feedback. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and we can share the results. It looks like over 50% are going to be using Read Tech, which we love to see. And then it looks like we do have some folks that are planning on using FDA CEDAR Direct or still undecided. So Gary and Caitlin, I will hand it back to you.
Great. Another hot topic with my clients is when is this due? When do we have to comply by? Is it something that has to be done right now, or can we push it off for another year?
Yeah, so panic here, the fourth quarter of each year. It's actually a very busy time. So let's take a look at this timeline. This registration and the renewal and certification process is the last 3 months of the year: October, November, December. And registering establishments, listing products, putting no changes out, and so on, all need to be happening within inside this fourth quarter. Now, what you can do, especially if you're looking at the OTC changes and want to do that in this fourth quarter, you certainly can submit your updated OTC listing to the FDA and take care of it in this particular year. But remember, you do have an option of submitting a blanket no change certificate this year. So during this fourth quarter, sometime in those 3 months, beginning end, preferably earlier the better, but sometime during this format, you can submit a blanket no change certificate and point to your OTC listing that you currently have in place with the old values. But keep in mind that sometime next year in 2024, maybe this is a little bit more convenient into your schedule, you'll need to make those updated OTC listings because this blanket no change, as our understanding, is only good for this particular year in 2023. So if you do submit the blanket no change certificate, then you'll need to couple that with your changes in 2024, and then you're good to go with all the new particular activities. So you have a couple options there. I know end of the year, it gets a little busy. So you might have a good reason to push this off to next year, but either one, make sure it fits your particular schedule. But the only thing that I would highly recommend is before the end of the year, you do one or the other. Submit that new SPL or the blanket no change. Don't let that roll into next year or be late. Then you have other ramifications, with the drug product being expired and that sort of thing. So that's the timing questions, hopefully, and the answers related to that. Aaron, I see another poll question. Let's pull that out and take a look at that one.
Yes, so we did have a question related to the timing, and this one is short and sweet, simple. So if you could just let us know when you plan on updating your OTC Monograph listings, if you're going to do it this year prior to December 31, or if you're planning to wait till next year and complete it in 2024. So we will leave this open for just the next few seconds so we can get some more of your votes in. And again, we really do appreciate all the audience participation in our polls. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll out. And it looks like we have a pretty good split, about 57% thinking that they're going to take care of it this year, and 43% waiting until next year, 2024.
Great, thanks, Erin. Now, if you're considering using ReadTech to support you on this OTC monograph change, I can give you a bit more information on how we can do so. Now, if you are an existing client of ours, we have already updated our TLLF, our label listing form, which is our data collection form for that metadata information. So this update to the form captures the new OTC monograph codes. And if you need that new form, please contact your account manager and we'd happily send that over your way. And if you are making that update now, before the end of the year, you would either use that form to update with the new monograph number, rather than merging all of your old information from the old form to the new form of your product listing. You can also request this directly with our SPL team when you're placing your order. In your email, we ask that you specify what product you are updating and simply explain that you are updating your monograph and simply identify the monograph number that you would be switching to. This will be a bit of a time saver, so you are not taking the old form and updating against the new form. So that's always an option, and you can always reach out to your account manager for more information on that. If you are planning to use the blanket no change this year, you can simply use your NDC codes to submit for the new year, but in the new year, you will have to update that monograph, and we can, like I said, send you over that new data collection form. Now, if you are a single source user, we are in the process of updating single source to capture these new monograph codes. If you have an urgent request to update these, email spl@readtech.com directly. They can process those updates for you in the meantime. But like I said, we are in the process of updating single source to capture these new codes, and we will keep you up to date as to when that will launch. Perfect. And then this image here, this gives you a bit of insight of the change in our form. Much like Gary went over earlier, the only sections that you'll see a change is in the category and the OTC monograph ID, or excuse me, the OTC monograph citation has changed to monograph ID. So those are the two priorities that we will focus on. And if at any point you need any clarification on what monograph ID you should be using, you could always reference this webinar. I know Gary listed earlier in the call exactly what the translations are, but we would be happy to work through that with you. And lastly, I'd like to walk you through how we perform our services. If you are not a current ReadTech client, we'd be happy to sign you up and tell you a little bit more about our services and get you that new data collection form. When you are placing an order with ReadTech, we ask that you populate that data collection form and you provide us with any additional data, such as the PDF of the drug label image that includes the drug facts. You would send those two elements to ReadTech. We would convert the file and send it back to you. Once you've reviewed the document to confirm that all of your updates have been captured, you would either tell ReadTech, please request on my behalf to FDA. We would push that through the ESG. Or if you do manage your own gateway, you could go ahead and push that through to the gateway yourself. Once submitted through the ESG, it is then posted on public databases like the NDC directory and DailyMed. Great. And then just some benefits of working with ReadTech. We are really here to help your organization do more. We understand that you may have some limited resources, especially during the fourth quarter. People are on vacation, enjoying their holidays, but also urgently getting these end of year reports done. So we know your team is busy and we're here to help. We're able to create a harmonious scenario with your existing resources. Your team is still a critical piece of providing this information, but we're able to help you be more efficient with your time. And like I said, if you are not a current ReadTech client and you'd like to learn more about becoming a client, please reach out directly and we'd be happy to give you more information. Great, so now we're gonna break for a quick commercial break before we wrap up today's call. First and foremost, the cosmetic establishment registration and product listing topic has been a hot one recently. There's some new requirements regarding cosmetic products. We did a recent webinar on the MOCRA Act, so please feel free to use this link when we send you the slides to view that old webinar. And then we also have an upcoming webinar regarding end-of-year reporting in just a few weeks. So if any clarification is needed on what to do during this fourth quarter and what is required to be submitted, please join this webinar. We will be sending an email invite to all of the attendees later this week, I believe. Great, and I'll pass it back to you, Gary.
Well, I just wanted to throw this one page out there that we'll be covering in the end of year webinar. This is just a teaser. We're not going to go into that particular slide right now, but the regulatory calendar is really busy and it gets real hot at the end of the year. So we'll talk about the various options, your timing requirements, and what is new this year is the OTC monographs. We'll revisit, your options for that. And if your manufacturing site also has cosmetic products, we'll give a quick little overview of what the cosmetic requirements are. Initially, submissions need to be done this year, so that is a brand new item on your calendar, and we'll take a look at the cosmetic requirements. Aaron, I think you have one final poll question. This has been very good. Thank you so much for the audience participation.
Yes, so we just launched our last poll question. How do you plan to submit the cosmetic registration and listing data to the FDA? And you'll see the options there on your screen. Manually enter data and mail paper forms, manually enter data into Cosmetic Direct website, use on-premises or SaaS SPL tool for e-submission, use SPL e-submission service from ReadTech, or use SPL e-submission service from someone other than ReadTech. So we'll leave this open for just a few more seconds, and then we'll jump right into the Q&A to close out this webinar. Okay, so I'm going to close this and share the results quickly. And it looks like we have about 70% planning to manually enter data into the Cosmetic Direct website, and about 30% using our ReadTech services. So we thank everyone for your participation in the polls today. It really does help us kind of, present the correct information in upcoming webinars and things like that when you guys give us this feedback. So Gary and Caitlin, we did have quite a few questions come in for you guys. So maybe if we could get to like 4 or 5 of them. So to kick it off, does all of this apply to ingestible drugs, topical OTC such as sunscreens, or to both?
I'm sorry, what was that about sunscreen?
So they're asking if these OTC monograph changes apply to just ingestible drugs, just topical over-the-counter products such as sunscreen, or if they apply to both categories.
Yeah, so there is the scope, it would be for the OTC monographs. So there is this sunscreen. I'm going to go back to the big long list. Give me a second. There is a monograph 20, I believe it is. Yes. So M20, which referred to Part 352, the sunscreen drug products for OTC monograph. If you had been using that particular citation in the past, you'll need to move that over to the monograph 20 version in the future. So that would be, the sunscreen that falls into this particular category. If you've been using, or if you have a drug product that does not fall into that, is not being placed on the market with this particular citation, In other words, it might have either an NDA or an ANDA, and you've been using some kind of a reference to an application, then this change that we've been talking about today does not apply. So there is I understand the two camps. There's drug products that have application numbers associated with them, and there are drug products that are claiming the OTC monograph. So depending on where you are, only if you're in the OTC monograph camp that you would need to make these changes. Otherwise, there's no reference to these citations when you have a drug that is put on the market based on an application, either like a you might have NDA or ADN. Yeah, I don't think this particular change would apply to those application drug products, Aaron.
Great, great. But from looking at this list, Gary, it looks like it does apply to both ingestible and topical products.
Yes, so there could be, excuse me, depending on what part you have here. So there's a pretty long list. There are some of these sunscreen products. There's also there's topical products. There's obviously some products that you would consume orally. So yeah, there's pretty long list of items that would be affected. So if you're claiming, and it's pretty straightforward, if you're claiming a part number citation in the past, then you need to make these changes. If you have not been claiming a citation a part number in the past, then it would not be applicable.
Great, Gary. Thank you so much for clearing that up. And I believe this next question you might have just answered as well, but I'm going to ask you again just to be on the safe side. What if the monograph is not final and doesn't have a monograph number? And the person who asked the question actually gave an example of consumer antiseptics. Yeah,
so there are, remember, in the old framework, there were these not final. Some of them were in transition, and some of those particular citations were final. So the ruling that came out, it was rather detailed about how the FDA was going to treat each one of those categories. Pretty straightforward. Monographs that were final, they're being moved over to monograph numbers. Most of the ones that were under review and still in process, or not enough information was provided. If from memory, I'm trying to remember, I believe most of those were also carried over to be monographs. The third category, those that were, still in limbo and, in process, and maybe they needed some more information, then the FDA, was going to make a determination on those. So there is a couple monographs that I remember seeing one monograph that is still in progress. If you go to the current FDA website, one of those particular ones is still in process for final review. I would point this person back to the ruling. Follow this particular website. This one right here. Go back to the CARES Act, and you can find some additional information about the transition. And I don't think we have time to go into the details, but you'll find documentation that talks very explicitly about those particular statuses. The FDA actually had a very good webinar on how this conversion was going to take place from the old CFRs over to the new monographs. And they have some pretty detailed charts about, if you're this particular category, what's it going to be in the future and the timing of that. So I would refer to that question, back to the FDA's webinar and the chart that shows how each category is handled in the future.
Great, thank you so much, Gary. Our next question, can you define the OTC manufactured under contract versus OTC monograph drug choices.
Oh yeah, so let's go find that. We talked about these two different selections that you might have picked under the marketing category. So if you are a manufacturer of an OTC monograph, and basically inside your enterprise, you have a facility that does the manufacturing of these monographs, then you have in the past been picking these first two, or one of the first two. You've been either using the monograph final or not final. The subtle difference with the third one there, where a product is manufactured under contract. So there's a number of contract manufacturers, CMOs, contract manufacturer organizations, that are able to manufacture products, but they do it as a business agreement with another party. And this would be like a private label distributor. So typically a private label distributor has a business agreement with a contract manufacturer organization, CMO, and basically that agreement says, we want you to manufacture this product and we're going to brand it with our particular identification and distribute it under our particular branding. So that's the subtle difference where the actual manufacturing process takes place of the drug. So if it's made in-house, you would have been picking one of these two marketing categories. If you have a business agreement and quote a contract with another business, another party that is doing the actual manufacturing, then that particular listing would be referred to as the OTC monograph drug product, and they're able to still continue that marketing category, but inside that listing for that product, that manufactured product, the references to the part numbers need to be switched over to the monograph numbers. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you so much, Gary. Another question that we received was, are there any special requirements for foreign filers?
Yeah, I don't know that, well, certainly foreign manufacturers need to register their establishments and list their products that they sell inside the US market. There are exceptions if you're manufacturing in the US and then exporting. So you don't have to list those particular exported products if that's the only market that you serve outside the US. Yeah, if you've been if you do have a foreign manufacturer OTC monograph product and now you continue to sell it into the US and you've been using these citation part numbers, then you will have to move over to the new values. The rules that we talked about today are for both domestic and foreign manufacturers.
Great, thank you so much, Gary. And I think we'll just have one more question and then wrap it up. And Caitlin, I believe this is a question for you. We had several people ask where they can get the updated read text submission forms.
Yes, so please reach out to your account manager and we can provide that to you. Also, if you go to the end, Gary, I think we have our contact information.
Yes, it is there you go.
There we go. Please reach out to pharma@readtech.com. This email address will get you in touch with our full team. Your account manager would be on that email or your sales rep. As long as you reach out to this email, we can send you over that new form. We do have the updated form for the single product form as well as a kit product. So if the kit product form applies to you, we will send you both. So like I said, just reach out to this email. We'll get that right over to you.
Okay, great. Well, I think that wraps us up today. Gary and Caitlin, thank you for providing all this information. And thank you to our audience for joining us and for your participation. As we said, we will be sending over slides and a copy of this webinar, and also look for an invitation to be registered for our year-end deadlines webinar. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thanks. Bye now.
Bye.